The Intergalactic Refugee Processing Center on Station Chronos 7 hummed with the cacophony of 1,000 species seeking sanctuary. Translators chirped, officials barked orders in binary code, and the air shimmered with pheromone-based communications that left visible trails through the recycled atmosphere. In the midst of this chaos, a massive draconian female sat motionless in the corner, her scaled body hunched protectively over 3 small hatchlings that clung to her chest. Eleanor Chen had seen this pattern before. 20 years as a combat medic in the human expeditionary forces had taught her to spot the invisible casualties, the ones everyone walked past because their wounds didn't bleed. She watched as intake officer after intake officer approached the draconian, spoke at her with increasing volume and frustration, then marked something on their datapads before moving on. The Dragon Mother's amber eyes tracked each departing official with an expression Eleanor recognized: resignation mixed with desperate hope. "Ma'am, we've been through this sector 3 times, Jasper complained, adjusting the strap of his security detail vest. The young officer was fresh from the academy, all polished insignia and regulation haircut. "Command says we need to sweep the eastern quadrants. There's been chatter about smugglers using the refugee influx as cover." Eleanor held up one hand, her eyes never leaving the draconian. The female's head frills were pressed flat against her skull, a sign of submission or fear in draconian body language. But more telling were her hands, which moved in small, aborted gestures whenever someone approached, as if trying to communicate in a language no one was listening for. "Give me 5 minutes," Eleanor said. She crossed the processing floor, stepping over the belongings of a Metherian family and skirting a group of crystalline refugees who chimed anxiously at her passage. The draconian tensed as Eleanor approached, her inner eyelids flickering nervously. Eleanor stopped at a respectful distance, about 3 meters, the traditional draconian greeting space, and slowly raised her hands. "Peace and recognition," Eleanor signed in Galactic sign language, her fingers forming the precise shapes she'd learned during a peacekeeping mission to the Outer Rim. "I see you. Do you need assistance?" The effect was instantaneous. The draconian's head frills shot up, her eyes widening with an emotion that transcended species barriers, relief so profound it bordered on disbelief. Her hands trembled as she signed back. "You understand?" The signs were slightly different from standard GSL, incorporating regional variations Eleanor had to piece together. "No one here understands. My children. We need asylum. The war." Eleanor nodded and signed back. "I understand. I will help. What is your name?" "Shkareth. My mate. Killed in bombardment. These are all I have left." The hatchlings, sensing their mother's emotional shift, chirped softly and buried themselves deeper into her chest scales. "Chen, what are you doing?" Jasper had followed her, his hand resting on his sidearm out of habit. "That's a draconian. They were hostiles in the Kepler campaign." "Were hostiles," Eleanor corrected, still signing as she spoke. Past tense. "And this one's deaf, which is why she's been sitting here for God knows how long while every bureaucrat in the station walked past her." She turned back to Shkareth. "The young male is with me. He is safe."
"Can you tell me what happened?"
The story that unfolded in flickering signs and gestures painted a picture Eleanor had seen too many times. A civilian population caught between warring factions, a bombardment that destroyed not just buildings but entire ways of life. Shkareth had been deaf since birth, considered disabled by draconian military standards and thus overlooked during evacuation priorities. She'd fled with her 3 hatchlings through devastated territories, trading away everything she had for passage on a refugee transport. "They say we need auditory processing to claim asylum." Shkareth signed, her movements becoming more agitated. "That I cannot care for young ones without hearing. But I have always been deaf. I have always survived. My children thrive." As if to prove the point, one of the hatchlings, a small female with iridescent green scales, poked her head out and chirped at Eleanor. The medic and Eleanor automatically cataloged the signs: clear eyes, healthy scale sheen, alert behavior. These children were well cared for. Eleanor felt the familiar burn of righteous anger that had driven her through countless bureaucratic battles during her service. She pulled out her command override badge, a privilege granted to veterans of her rank for situations exactly like this. "Jasper, get me Officer Administrator Vextil. Now, Chen, you can't just—" "That's Sergeant Chen to you, officer. And yes, I can." She turned the badge in her fingers, letting the holographic authentication shimmer. These people fell through the cracks because no one bothered to learn their language. That ends now. Within the hour, Eleanor had assembled a small team. A Vulpinian social worker who'd worked with disabled refugees before, a human linguist specializing in nonverbal communications, and grudgingly Jasper, who'd proven surprisingly useful once he stopped thinking about regulations and started thinking about people. The breakthrough came when the linguist pulled up the Galactic Refugee Convention on her datapad. Article 12, Section 7, she read aloud. No sentient being shall be denied sanctuary based on sensory disabilities or communication differences. All stations must provide accommodation. Which means, Eleanor added, signing simultaneously for Shakareth's benefit, that this station has been in violation for every deaf refugee they've turned away or ignored. Administrator Vextil, a bureaucratic centaurian with more interest in avoiding scandals than injustice, suddenly became very cooperative. Accommodations were made. A translator fluent in GSL was assigned to the refugee processing department. Shakareth and her hatchlings were given temporary housing in the family sector, with assurances that their asylum application would be properly processed. As the draconian family was led away to their new quarters, Shakareth paused and turned back to Eleanor. Her hands moved in a sign Eleanor had never seen before, something unique to draconian culture. The linguist whispered a translation, oath debt. Deepest gratitude bound in honor. Eleanor signed back simply, we protect those who cannot speak for themselves. It is what humans do. Later, as she and Jasper completed their security sweep of the eastern quadrants, the young officer was uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, he spoke. I've been trained in 17 forms of threat assessment and 15 combat protocols. But nobody ever taught me to stop and actually see people. Eleanor smiled grimly. That's because the Academy assumes everyone worth protecting can shout for help in standard Galactic. They forget that sometimes the ones who need us most are the ones the system isn't built to hear. Is that what makes humans different? In all the HFY stories, it's always about our fighting spirit or stubborn survival instinct. Maybe, Eleanor said. Or maybe it's simpler than that. We learned a long time ago back on Earth that a civilization is measured not by how it treats its loudest voices, but by how it protects its most vulnerable ones, even when they're silent. She looked back at the processing center, where lights were beginning to dim for the station's sleep cycle. Somewhere in those corridors, a deaf dragon mother was tucking 3 hatchlings into bed, secure in the knowledge that someone had finally stopped to listen. That, Eleanor thought, was worth more than any medal she'd ever earned. The end.